All right. Did you miss us? We're back, but this time we sat in different chairs so that it will seem like a completely different time.
Yes, that's great.
Okay.
Yeah, time has passed.
But a minute passed between our last Facebook Live video. Okay, so I am so excited. I'm Audrey.
I'm Sarah.
And we're both camp directors. I didn't introduce us on the last one, but we're camp directors at different camps, and we've been really good friends for a long time. How long have we been friends?
20 years?
Maybe 20 years.
Yeah.
Okay. So we have so much fun talking about all things in life. And one of our favorite topics that we both really believe in is strengths. And so we decided to talk to you today about focusing on our kids' strengths. So before we started recording, I was telling Sarah about a couple of different, I had 2 different speaking engagements this week with some groups of parents on the topic of coaching your kids on their friendship skills. And one of the concepts that I really love to talk about is focusing on strengths. And so I was telling Sarah about this activity that I did. So I'll do it with you, pretend like you're in a big group. So the group, I think there's like 25 parents out there. And so I say, okay, raise your hand if when you were a kid, you always did your math homework first because you loved how there was just a correct answer. And it was just really easy and fun to get math done. And so, some of the people raise their hand. And then I'll say something like, raise your hand if you loved reading when you were little and always looked forward to classes when you got assigned books and got to talk about books. And so then some of the people raised their hand. And then I said, raise your hand if you loved a particular sport and were like a varsity athlete. It's just really so could do that sport just like all the time, loved it so much. And so some of the people raised their hands. And, I go through all these different topics about just, the range of things that we are all interested in is huge. So, artistic, athletic, academic stuff, just character traits. Like raise your hand if you were the one who liked to do stand-up comedy with your friends and was like, you just liked your friends laughing with you, or raise your hand if you were the one calling everybody to set up social events.
That was me.
Oh my gosh, that must be a camp director thing. That was me too.
Yes.
And this was before cell phones.
Absolutely. It was a long call.
Yeah, you had to call everybody and say, we're going to meet at this time. Okay, that was me too.
Yeah. Oh, that's so fun.
See,
I knew I liked her.
Our husbands always say that we're exactly the same, and this is just another example. So I go through that whole range of all these different things that are basically, they're kind of like our strengths and interests and things that we really love. And then I say to the group, raise your hand if you were great at all of those things. And of course, nobody raises their hand. And there's like a moment of I think some people have the aha moment that I know I had when I first thought about this. And it's that, wow, you know what? I'm good at some things and I have some strengths and I'm not good at everything. And I've turned out okay. I've survived even though I wasn't great at every subject and I wasn't great at everything. And also we are living in a time when a lot of our kids are getting the message from the culture at large and from parents and from us, and I've been guilty of it too, that they are supposed to be great at everything. So Sarah has this great same interest in strengths, and her husband gave her a really neat gift, which was a really intense training. So why don't you tell us, Sarah, about the training that you received about strengths and what you learned?
Sure. Well, I had the privilege of attending the Gallup Strength Finders accelerated coaching class. I am in the process of becoming a certified Gallup Strength Finders coach. What that really means for me is having a better ability to help people identify their natural talents, the way they are made, what makes them tick, and investing in those talents that then can become strengths that really can serve them well, whether it's in relationships, in their work, in their school life, really capitalizing on how they naturally are and trusting that it's those strengths that will help them succeed. It's those strengths that make them special. Gallup, my trainers said that when you focus on weaknesses only, you prevent failure. But when you focus on strengths, you can reach success. And I find in parenting and at work and in so many things, we tend to look at what we're not, or what our kids are not, or what our staff is weak in, and we forget that what they really bring to the table is their unique strengths.
Right.
And that lines up with my faith, that lines up with how I enjoy building teams of people that together have the synergy and the combination of strengths to really do the job well. We also, at our staff at the office, down here in Southern California, we also invited a strengths coach to work with our whole staff through the fall, and we'll be meeting again with them in the spring. And to identify what everybody brings to the table, to really celebrate that, to allow for that, and be be patient. Please don't ask me to do any strategic market planning. I cannot think strategically to save my life. However, I can connect people well. And I am very, very responsible. I will get the job done. And I like to communicate. So let me talk.
Oh, gosh.
And so if I can stay in my sweet spot and you can stay in your sweet spot, what happens is there's higher engagement all across the board. There's higher satisfaction and contentment. And when you get to parenting, when a child knows that what they innately are is enough, and not just enough, but spectacular, then you get to have the child I think we were meant to have.
Oh gosh. Oh my gosh, that was so beautiful. My sister calls it getting people in the right seat on the bus.
Yes, that's from Good to Great. Fabulous book. Please read Good to Great. Yeah.
And it's so true, because really when you think about it, so as adults, if we're being kind of like thriving in our jobs, we have been able to find a spot where we are able to utilize our strengths and grow them.
Yeah.
And really
keep investing in them.
Keep investing in them, growing them, getting better at them. And it feels so good when you're in a job and in a role where you're like, wow, I'm contributing here and I get in flow and I just love what I'm doing.
Yes.
And but it's kind of a lifelong process, right? Figuring out even with your team. And oftentimes someone who you work with who's a great person, but wow, they're not quite in the right spot. And just by figuring out which are the parts that are of them that are going to really contribute. What are the things that when they do them, wow, they really shine.
Right.
And if you can just figure out, sometimes you need yet another person to fill a seat.
Sometimes.
But unfortunately, I feel like with our kids, it's like, the world seems to have sort of one path.
One picture of success.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so, if your child if their strengths aren't in the kind of exact places that the culture, the schools, and everything else say are what you're supposed to have, our kids can start feeling really sad and bad about themselves. And so a big way that parents, I think, can help and sort of counter the possible negative messages is to really build up strengths at home. So what are some ideas that you have, like based on your training? What are just some maybe simple practices that parents can do to, not without having to become a certified coach, what are just some simple ways that parents can kind of speak to and build up their kids' strengths?
That's a great question. One exercise that we can do with young kids, but older kids, and even with grown-ups, is ask each other, name a time, tell me about a time that you really experienced success, that you felt really good about a project you did or something you created, a day that was very successful to you. And have the child or the spouse or the office partner name that. And then say, what did you do? What did you contribute to make that a successful experience? And even a young kid could say, well, I had the good idea to do it this way instead. Oh, so you're a problem solver. And helping them name what they contributed. Well, I just, I kept making mistakes, and then I finally figured out how to do it. Oh, so you can try again. That is great to be perseverant. Right.
Grit.
Go for it. It may be, I felt it was successful because I remembered that one person wasn't included, and I went and got her, and then we all left together for the field. You're an includer. That made it successful. So let's look for other ways where you can keep being an includer. Let's look for other activities where you get to problem solve. Let's for and keep going back to the strength they already named. They've already been exercising. That builds some deep esteem because it's them playing out their own strength. You know, often you might have heard this, but when I had my second child, someone reminded me, make sure you love the child you have, not love the child you wish you had. And I think when we keep looking at the beautiful things of our kids and really celebrating those strengths, even if they weren't my plan, I have a ton to revel in. So I have one child who is a quiet, strong athlete and a very strong student, but he's really low key about it. So he doesn't get noticed a lot, but he's very content. I have one kiddo who's brilliant on stage, and his humor is always in the right direction, never at someone's expense. Right. And I have a little community builder on my hands. She can build a community out of strangers in about 5 seconds. What a delight. So Absolutely. To keep finding ways they can keep building on those things. And then when you get out in the world and you have some failures and some times where you don't have the right talents, I hope they always know to go back right away to trust what they do have.
Oh, that's beautiful. And I think when you were talking and a lot of the things you mentioned, I think as parents, sometimes we get really focused on the things that kind of have a score or a grade.
Like the credibility in that place.
Yes. Or like, whether it's grades or a certain team or that kind of thing. And I think it's really important to remember that it's those character traits and those things like you were saying, those are the things, now everyone's talking about a lot, social emotional skills. And so at camp, we are both very highly focused on the social emotional skills. In fact, that's really all we don't have academics and we don't really have like competitive athletic sports. So the kids are completely taken out of those things. And instead, we just love that what we get to focus on with them is just the social part, the emotional part. And it's
those
really
character traits.
Yes. And that's what our counselors work on noticing. And so when you were talking, I was just thinking about how beautiful it is, because you know how sometimes you don't see something in yourself, like a strength in yourself, until someone notices it. And so, a friend or a coach or a teacher or somebody says to you, I just saw how you noticed this person over here who was on their own and, invited them to join us. Wow, you're really aware of other people and really kind and inclusive. And then they get that message, and then guess what? They keep doing it. Yes. So then you have this strength that was already there that's been built up and encouraged, which is a great thing to do, because how great is that if someone who's told they're kind and encouraging and inclusive owns that, and it's part of them, and then wherever they go, they can know that. Even like when you think about like traditional success in a job, for someone to be able to go into a job interview and say, if they ask what your strengths are, if you can say things, I'm really good, like on a team, working with a group and really following through and doing my part.
Yes.
Or, you know what, I work better on my own and I really get stuff done, but I'm much better on a project that you assign to me and I can do it on my own. But to be able to have that kind of self-insight really helps, I think, just in terms of kind of all areas. And so I love just when you're just that whole concept of just saying, hey, I noticed this about you. And it's this, these great traits that our kids have already.
They're all in there.
Yes.
The power that we have as parents when we help name those qualities for them and really highlighting them. I think we underestimate the power of naming that, noticing it and naming that. It's another reason I love camp when my kids get to go to camp, because other adults may see gifts and talents that I have missed in my busyness or whatever. And so for that camp counselor to say, hey, did you know your child led this way, or your child was generous in this way? I really appreciate the voice of other grownups naming their skill sets if I have missed it. And so anyway, the power of naming it is pretty something else.
So that just reminded me, I'm reading this book. Actually, so I listened to this audiobook in, I think in December, and then I gave the book to our whole office staff to do as a group read. It's called The Power of Moments by Chip Heath and Dan Heath. And it turns out that Dan Heath is talking at the American Camp Association conference later this month. And I didn't even realize that connection, but I'm really excited and hoping that he can sign my copy. You're listening, Dan. But in the book, so it's obviously the title is The Power of Moments, and it talks about all these different kinds of moments and the kind of moments that are most memorable and the kind of moments that help you learn something. It's really great. Highly recommend it. It's really good. And one whole section told a story about a girl who loved to sing and had a very negative experience with a choir teacher in high school, where the teacher said, your voice is like too distinctive. I can hear it too much. Just mouth the words. And so this girl who loved to sing stopped singing. She was in choir, but she was mouthing. And she went to summer camp. And she was in the music room at her summer camp. And at the end of the, singing choir, whatever it was, the music teacher said, come here and sit next to me at the piano. And because the teacher had noticed that she wasn't singing, that she was just opening her mouth. And they sang together. It's giving me chills retelling the story. Let me just tell you. So they at the piano teacher played and they sang some songs together. And the piano teacher or the music teacher took the girl's hand, her face in her hands, and said, you are like the love child of Joan Baez and Bob Dylan. And said, and gave her this gift. She had a beautiful, distinctive, amazing voice that one adult
had been lost all that time.
Right. So she had a negative moment with that choir teacher that could have dictated not singing and taking away this beautiful thing that really was a strength and something she loved too. And this other adult said one sentence to her, and of course, both built her up and encouraged her and got her singing again. And anyway, she ended up in the music business, or so. Anyway. But what was really powerful to me is just again this whole lesson that as parents or any adults working with kids, we can say that one sentence. That could change the trajectory of how that person feels about themselves their whole life.
Wow. That's powerful.
And it's just that strengths thing. I think that I said this yesterday to this group of parents, and I said, I know that I'm not in charge of the world, so I don't get to dictate this, but I would really say, if possible, I don't believe in tutoring. I just wish that, first of all, I think that kids should be able to learn whatever sufficiently that they need to learn just at school, and that should just be provided as part of school. And then the other part of it is, say your strength, say that like math or like academic subjects, one topic is just not your favorite. So of course you need to pass the class, but I don't think you need to get an A. I think if you're struggling, you get in the class that's most appropriate for you, that's not a huge stretch, that's not too challenging, and you pass it. And unless you're not passing it, like if you're, if you can't get a C and you need a little bit of extra help, okay, but not if you're in too advanced of a class or you're trying to be, trying to be in all advanced classes, for example. Because to me, if we're making our kid who, loves to read and loves art and loves these other things, and then they, there are a couple things they don't like, and we're making them spend more of their very limited free time on the things that they don't enjoy, they're going to just start feeling icky. Adults, we don't do that to ourselves. As adults, we choose to spend our time, generally, especially our free time,
in what we love.
You and I like watching webinars and reading parenting books, and we enjoy that. It's not drudgery for us. There are some things that people could ask us to do that we would be like, I don't want to do that. I'm not going to spend my time on that. I don't even care if you teach me to be better at it. I don't want to work on insurance or accounting. I just don't. I don't feel like it. And so I think I love just that concept of just stepping back and saying, you know what? When you get the report card, focus in on the top grades. Wow, you've got an A in English? That's really, you just really love to read, and that your writing is so beautiful.
And especially as kids are in high school and too often feeling the pressure that they have to take 5 AP classes. We have pushed hard that our kids take an AP class in a subject that brings you joy. So one of my sons loves computer science and AP physics and AP engineering, and how good. He ate it up. He loved it.
Mm-hmm.
Another one of my kids, the humanities are what they love. Well-taught history.
Mm-hmm.
Well, AP history is absolutely appropriate then. Right. But to make sure they know that the message isn't from us, that you must also take AP Calc and AP everything else. So I think we can put the brakes on mm-hmm. for our kids. Mm-hmm. That tendency just to AP for the sake of APing, which is not healthy or wise, and that's a whole nother webinar podcast.
We'll have to do another one.
Get me going. Yeah. But all that to say, helping children identify their passions, and I know passions is overused, so identify the interests that really bring them joy, and then helping them make choices around deepening that interest, deepening that expertise, really mastering, right, some subjects and topics, and even letting them have opportunities to teach others is really, really fun. So, just capitalizing on those strengths and not over-focusing on weaknesses. Now, that's not to say that we can just let our weaknesses splash all over. We need to accommodate for them, and we need to be appropriate with them. But sometimes, if we only focus on weaknesses, our fabulous kids grow up thinking they are less than, and they're not less than. They're fabulous the way they are.
Absolutely. Oh my gosh, I so agree with that. And I know we weren't really supposed to be talking about this, but there's just been so many tragic events recently of just, kids who get lost and they just don't realize that they're so amazing just the way they are. Yeah. And, many of the addictions and all these really sad things, a lot of it just comes from that whole sense of like, I must not be good enough the way I am, or there's something wrong with me because, maybe I'm not in the right classes or whatever, or there are right classes, whatever that means.
And we as grown-ups do that too. We compare all of the time. Yeah.
Right. And my favorite quote I would tell my kids, comparison is the thief of joy. Because we all are just uniquely made to be ourselves. And we need, this is another thing about strengths too, talking about our own strengths. You know what I mean? Obviously you don't walk around the world saying, oh, I'm so fabulous at da-da-da-da. But with our own kids and in our families, it's a really important conversation to have, rather than be self-deprecating and saying, oh, I was terrible at math too, and I just can't do this, I can't do that. You could say, I've just always really loved, I've always loved to read. And so I realized that I enjoy it. It's something I'm interested in. So that's something that I do because it brings me joy. And so I'm going to take the time to do that. And I think just modeling that for our kids, even just that speaking to our strengths, I guess I would say. And then I had another thought as you were talking too, that one of the things that happens, and I know it happened with one of my kids in particular, our kids have a strength that's not an interest.
Yes. We call them killer skills, my sister and I. Call them killer skills. They're killer skills. Like, I can be really administrative. I can file you right out of the room, but I hate filing.
Right. Okay. That's a really good point. And then with our kids, it's especially difficult when we see them really like, wow, this kid's, whatever it is,
has an aptitude.
They have a natural aptitude and they are so good at it.
Yes.
And you start, your brain starts going off in these directions
you're
of
right.
like, I'm going to be at the Olympics in 12 years or whatever it is, and a part of it is too, it usually is something that we don't have ourselves.
Oh, you're right.
So it's like you see that in your kid and you kind of think, oh gosh, if I had that when I was a kid. And that, I know for me, it was, I was with one of my kids and she was just really gifted at softball. And she started when she was little, and she loved pitching, and we used to pitch in the backyard, and she would always want to pitch. She loved doing it. And it really brought her a lot of joy for a few years. And then as she got older, and it was probably like around, I think her last team was maybe in 8th grade, and, she was getting asked to be on club teams, and she was starting to be on these teams that were just getting so competitive, and it was just not fun anymore. And it was kind of like for us, like, well, we loved watching her play because it was really beautiful to see it. She was so precise with her. And yet, too, a strength that is no longer serving you or doing that or utilizing that in terms of like more of a talent, I guess I would say, is not, you don't need to do that anymore. And that's another, it's sometimes hard as a parent to admit that and to just really say, and I think we talked about this before in our family pace and space thing, even something that you once loved or the kid once loved can sometimes later not be anymore. And that's when you step back and say, like, you know, maybe with your son who's really into theater now, there's probably a time when he was doing some sports. And maybe there came this time where you said, hey, you know what, this is all too much time. What do you really want to do?
Right. We did. We had the big choice decision.
Yeah.
And he made the perfect choice for himself.
Yeah. And you have to kind of keep yourself a little bit out of that.
Yes.
So, I mean, I know that some kids end up doing nothing, which I don't like that option.
Right.
When they're getting kind of, oh gosh, you know, sort of they're starting to be told by the world that you can't do anything, like, you know, you didn't make the team and you can't do this and you can't do that. So sometimes I've seen this happen with kids where they end up just kind of dropping out of everything.
Yeah.
And so in that case, I do think you need to like help them discover whether it's just trying a few new things or just really talking to them and seeing like, is there something they want to, you know, investigate or visit or, you know, what could be things that they've little sparks of interest that you could just see. Because I do think we all need something outside of just school. Like our kids need something that something
else who they are.
Yeah. So that's really wonderful. Okay. We've been going on for about 10 minutes longer than we planned.
Oh my.
Because we just do that sometimes.
We kind of do that.
But we, you know, this is such a fun topic and we'll go ahead and after we're done posting this, we're going to add in some links to maybe any books, resources about strengths so that you can do some investigation on your own. It's such a great and really fun topic to investigate, especially if you explore your own strengths.
Yes.
As you're doing it, because I mean, I don't know about you, but I've had a lot of aha moments doing some of these surveys.
Yes.
And it's been really helpful because then it's also explained some things for me.
Right.
About why I've done things certain ways or why sometimes I felt really good and comfortable doing something. And other times there were just job duties that I had that just really didn't.
Sure.
So anyway, thanks for listening to this focusing on our kids' strengths. And we will send you lots more information in the comments, and once I post this on the podcast, I'll put it in show notes as well.
That's great.
Thanks for joining us.
Thanks.
Okay, bye.
Bye-bye.